Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to be here with Sharif, our other presenter, and I'll introduce him in a second. But we are going to talk about a topic we're both very passionate about. We're going to share some new research on employee experience and how that's impacting working families today. And we're going to discuss how work is changing and how companies need to adapt to the reality of families within the workforce. So I'm thrilled to be here joined by Sharif Ghanem, who is the head of growth for Clio, a leading benefits provider that supports working families. And Sharif, I'm going to ask you if you could do something a little bit different today because we're talking about a very human topic. So I'm hoping you could introduce yourself as a human for our audience today.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Sharif Ghanem, and as Madeline said, I lead growth at Clio. I would say the most exciting part of my job, though, is getting to spend time out speaking with HR and benefits leaders about the challenges they're facing and how they're supporting working families. To introduce myself as a human, I am the youngest of four, which I think makes me uniquely positioned to arbiter debates within our household. I'm lucky enough to have a partner, Barbara, who is my better half. And I would say on a personal note, the reason I joined Clio and the reason I'm excited to talk about this topic today and really every day is that probably the biggest thing I think about outside of work is what does it mean to be a parent? What does it mean to be a caregiver to my parents and my partner's parents? And what does it mean to be a great member of my family and my household? So hopefully that helps, Madeline.
Absolutely. And I love that, Sharif, on a very human level, too, for a little bit of background about myself. I'm the oldest of three. So we're coming at this with very different perspectives of, where we kind of sit in this family structure. I have two boys, and this topic is so important to me as a human because I've experienced starting a family in the workforce and experienced challenges throughout now that my kids are almost teenagers. So it is a very important topic. It's not one I think most companies have talked about up until probably 2 years ago. So I'm thrilled that we're having this conversation. And I know we have a lot to share here. So it's been quite a year, over the past year, it's been quite a two years in this workforce. And we're seeing that work has permanently changed. And the impact on working families, whether you're starting a family, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're like me and you have kids growing up and entering different stages and different challenges, we need support from our employers. Family life, personal life, it doesn't stop for work. And we need, as employers, to be able to support working families in a very different way. So I'm definitely excited for our conversation today. We have two things that we're going to do here. We're going to share some slides, share some research, because we both certainly have explored this topic and we have some numbers to share with all of you. And then the second half of the presentation, we're going to get into a discussion. We have some questions. Sharif, I'm very curious to hear from your experience with working with companies, what you're seeing, how companies can get started down this path. And we're going to turn over to the audience for some questions as well. So that's the structure for today. And we're going to talk about the current state of employee experience. There's really two themes, Sharif, that we talked about prior to putting together this webinar, and I want to explore them a little bit during this first portion of the webinar. The first is retention. We know retention is such an issue. We know people are leaving the workforce. I shared with you, I have two friends that just left for family-related reasons in the past 2 weeks, and that's one piece of it, and we don't necessarily know how to support families during these times when they've made those decisions. The second piece is we know employers want to help. We know that the desire is there, and I think that's a really positive place to be in. Is that sort of what you're seeing at Clio as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in many ways, retention and the struggles we've seen really across every industry with retention, it's a symptom of something bigger. And certainly employers, I think, realize this. They're starting to think about what does it mean to support families. That is a big question in itself, and that's one I'm hoping we can dig into together today.
Absolutely. So we're going to start off with the poll, and we are going to ask all of you why you joined today. Is this a topic that's important to you personally? Is your company investing more in employee experience? Do you want to support working families this year? Is that the path you're going down? And are you looking for strategies to better hire talent, looking for strategies to better retain talent? So what's kind of the primary driver for your participation today? And we'll take a few minutes. I could see all of these as being options for people. It's, certainly themes that I'm hearing from every company that we talk to in the research that we do.
Yeah, all of the above seems like
Yeah,
an
all of
easy
the
out,
above.
It's a little too easy.
So we'll take a couple more seconds here, and then I think we can share those polling results. And I'm not sure if, here we go. So it looks like for a lot of companies, hiring talent is a big theme. And I think what we're going to talk about in terms of companies that do support working families and the benefits and the structure around that, Sharif, that you're going to help us to understand really is a recruiting tool as much as it is a retention tool. And I think that's a really positive place for companies to be in right now. Excellent. So thank you all for participating in that poll question. The interesting thing about where we're at today and these discussions around employee experience, because every company's talking about it, is our workforce is so different and it's so diverse. We have 157 million workers in the workforce. 82 million workers are hourly workers. We call that the forgotten workforce. Those are workers that were frontline workers during the pandemic. They worked in grocery stores. They did delivery, even when people were very nervous to leave their homes. And yet we don't necessarily even give them the dignity or the humanity that they require in the workforce. We had up to 5 million women leave the workforce last year. I know everyone sort of has a different number there, but that's definitely a topic that's been discussed over the past year and how we can think about returnships and supporting women. 1 in 3 employees are looking for another job opportunity, and then 61% of employees still work from home. So we have very different needs within the workforce. And it's interesting to me, Sharif, because I see employee experience trying to put every single person through this same experience, through these same benefits, through the same support system. And that doesn't necessarily always make sense. And I know what you're seeing is a lot of stress and pressure being placed on working families given the nature of work today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's important to keep in mind, to your point, when we think about employee experience, there is a really diverse set of needs, and so the challenges of the sort of the modern workforce impact different populations differently. So while your research has found 1 in 3 employees are looking for a new job, when we actually think about working families, some of these challenges are exacerbated. So, for example, our research found that 50% of working families had 1 or more individuals take a step back from work, whether that meant reducing their hours, leaving their job altogether, making a change in their career, and that 40% were still considering making a change. And so as we think about, talent retention, as we think about talent attraction, I think the confounding variable here is what does it mean to create an inclusive workforce strategy that both attracts folks, but also helps them stay in the workforce with us, right?
Absolutely. And given kind of the situation and companies looking at employee experience as a one-size-fits-all, what we found is that 64% of employees don't feel valued. And that's after 2 years of being in a pandemic, remote work, companies really trying to figure out how to engage employees in a very different model. We're seeing that most employees don't feel valued. And I think that's, can feel a little disheartening. And I know research that you shared from the CDC found that 70% of parents feel anxiety and depression after this past 2 years. And I certainly can relate to that when I see this. It definitely feels like this is the reality that we're living in today.
Yeah, there's an element here also of just feeling validated in your own feelings, right? So when 70% of parents and caregivers report signs of depression or anxiety, it says something bigger about how collectively this group is feeling. And if we don't take steps to acknowledge it at a minimum, but then also act, it leads to sort of further challenges around belonging, which then exacerbates retention issues, right? We know there's a clear tie in between feeling a sense of belonging at work and feeling a sense of value and staying in that position. And it also has, an impact to your point previously around how you show up at home as well, right? So aside from, the stress and anxiety placed on parents and caregivers, what we know is nearly 80% of parents are worried about the mental health and well-being of their children during, certainly during the pandemic. That's been exacerbated. But, this is kind of core to the challenge. I think that it'll be valuable for us to unpack today, which is every time you kind of peel back a layer on this question, it introduces new questions, which can start to feel overwhelming as you think about solutions.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about some of the solutions in a minute. So given the nature of work, given what companies are facing today, the reality for working families and that stress and that anxiety that certainly goes along with work today, what we found is that humanity seems to be missing from this equation of employee experience. We found that only 9% of companies have improved employee trust, which I think is a big piece of this conversation today around working families in the past year. Only 22% of companies state that humanity is a critical component of their company culture when they're defining culture. And then only 20% are offering career development and advancement opportunities. And for working families, that career development is so important that they're not spending all of their time managing the stress that they have at home, that they are given the same opportunities as everyone else. So to me, this idea of humanity and dignity and empathy need to be part of employee experience. They need to be part of this discussion. And when we think about working families and that stress that we just talked about that they're going through, to me, humanity needs to be the core of those discussions.
Yeah, I completely agree, Madeline. And one of the things, it comes back to this notion of sort of humanity, but also the term I often think about is empathy, right? And especially as we seek to sort of define the problem so that we can define solutions, empathy goes a long way to starting to understand what does it mean to support somebody both at work and outside of work. In particular, in an environment where, depending on the industry and the type of work, you may not be seeing an employee every day, and certainly you may not have clear visibility into what happens the moment they leave work, both virtually or physically, right?
Right, exactly. And I think the situation that we come into, and we've talked about this, is that we're talking the talk, but not necessarily walking the walk. So there's a couple themes that have come up where we're talking about what's important. We're talking about what priorities our companies have, but we're not necessarily taking action on those priorities. And there's a few here I'm hoping we could just have a quick discussion around, because I think we've experienced this as employees. Companies know that these areas are important, but we don't necessarily align our words with our actions. And the first is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a priority. We found that, up to 90% of companies said that diversity, equity, and inclusion is their top priority for this year. We know companies want to prioritize this, but when you look at what they're doing, we found the number one strategy is just an annual training session. Once a year, investing in training, and then that's it. They're not making this a systemic change within their organization. They're not really thinking about how to change, and support employees in a different way. They're just doing the training, checking the box, and moving on. And I think for a lot of companies, that they think that's their only option.
Yeah, I would say one of the most exciting things I've seen in my discussions with employers has been the opportunity to connect DE&I goals to benefits goals, both in thinking about inclusivity and equity in benefits as a sort of a prerequisite for adding new benefits. But also, I think there's a scale element to this as well. Increasingly, what I hear when I talk to employers who have a global workforce is a focus on equity in the benefit strategy across regions. And I think these are really unique opportunities for employers to show their culture and their identity and what they present to employees. And it has an effect on current employees, but it also has an effect on your talent acquisition strategy. We can talk about sort of how those two overlap, but it's a win-win in that sense.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, to be able to think about including that right in your benefits and your communication is a benefit for attraction and retention. Flexibility is another one. I think, what we found is that so many companies are stating that they're offering more flexibility today. And then especially working families don't necessarily feel that. They don't necessarily feel that they're able to, leave work when they want to, take days when they need to, be able to openly share what needs that they have as caregivers or just, for their own families, because they're not really given the flexibility where organizations believe that they are.
Yeah, just to compare this to what we've seen in our survey data of working families, when we asked folks who were leaving the workforce their reason for doing so, nearly 40% said it was due to flexibility, right, and feeling like they didn't have that flexibility. So certainly we're seeing, this is core to the challenge, right, which is that we don't see employees always outside of work, and so how can we better understand their needs? Because parents and caregivers also have a tendency to be, they are silent warriors in a lot of senses. And so how do we start to uncover these needs proactively, right?
Yeah, and I think flexibility doesn't necessarily mean I'm working from home every single day. It could mean that I need a half day here or there. I need a half day this Monday, but not necessarily next Monday. And a lot of people still do want to work in an office. So it's really figuring out what employees need and being transparent and open about those conversations.
Right.
And then the final piece is productivity. We found this was so interesting to me when we looked at our employee survey data and then our employer survey data and the disconnect between productivity. So we found that over 80% of employees said that they're working more during the pandemic into this year than they've ever worked before. And when we asked employers, it was only 1 in 2 companies that stated that their employees are working more than they have pre-COVID. So that's a huge disconnect in just the reality of what people are doing. And when you talk about validation, and you mentioned this earlier, we have to validate that people are working hard, and that hard work is not just in their professional lives, but it's in their personal lives as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So we're going to dive into the questions in a minute, but just to kind of close out here, we found that only 11% of employees are asking how they can support working families in their employee engagement surveys. So those annual surveys that you do every year, if you're doing pulse surveys at different points during the year, ask those questions. Most companies are not asking about that. And then Sharif, you found sort of a positive spin at where we're at, and I think where we're going to head with some research that Willis Towers Watson has conducted.
Correct. And I think many of the major benefits consulting houses have started to focus in on this question of what does it mean to provide, quote unquote, family-friendly benefits. But I think one of the most recent stats I saw from Willis Towers Watson suggested that 77%, I should say, of employers stated that family-friendly benefits was a priority for them. And I think we'll talk about some of the reasons why that's the case. But it does certainly, perhaps my experience is certainly skewed, but it's certainly what I'm hearing out every day speaking with employers. The question, and I think your data gets at this, is what does it mean to support families? What does it mean to offer family-friendly benefits, and how do I go about understanding the needs of families, even beyond an annual survey? And as we dig into the discussion, I'd love to share some of the tactics or strategies I'm seeing employers deploy, and what seems to be working and what isn't, or where's the room for improvement.
Great. I can't wait to hear this too, because this is what the work that you do and the work that you're seeing companies do. And it's so important. I think so often we see like statements put on a career site to say, we support working families, a great place to work. And then we're not seeing the reality, especially when people are leaving. So we're going to dive in now to some of these questions in this discussion. So I have my first question, and I think Sharif will start with where you left off. What's driving this need for employers now, finally in 2022, to say we want to support working families? What's some of the reasons that employers are looking at more support for working families today?
Yeah, I think it fundamentally stems from the intersection of, I think, 3 big topics employers are constantly thinking about. One is health and well-being, both the broader well-being of the workforce, but also very practically, healthcare costs continue to rise. It's for most employers, it's second only to wages in terms of expense rate. It's never not top of mind, right? The second is around talent management, and in particular, right, we throw out terms like the Great Resignation or the Great Reevaluation, but consistently what we're seeing is across industries, a shortage of talent, a highly competitive labor market, right, that can't be ignored. And the last is something we touched on before, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, right? This is a priority for every employer. And when you think about how those topics intersect, how you support families and how you support caregivers becomes top of mind because they're such an important part of the workforce. They're often managers or leaders across organizations. They contribute meaningfully to culture. And so as you start to unpack each of those questions, the direction they often point back to is, how do I support families in the workforce as one of the key strategies you have to think about.
Yeah, to me, it's a real shift from a very reactive approach, like wait till people have a breakdown, wait till they're burnt out, wait till they're leaving, and then decide to support them, to taking a very proactive approach, which I know is what you're going to share, where we can say and anticipate that stress is a reality, and how can we support their health, how can we support them and give them the resources they need to come to work and also to still be parents and still be family members. So the second question I have is around the challenges. So we know we know companies, if you ask any company, they're going to say, we want to support working families. Absolutely. What happens with some of the obstacles that companies face? What are the challenges that they're facing after they've made this decision and then being able to execute on a strategy?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is, how do I define the problem, right, to be solved? And this is, we have a tendency generally to sort of solution first, as I know I certainly do this. And so, but that isn't as easy to do here, in part because something you and I have talked about is there hasn't always been solutions, certainly comprehensive solutions to this problem. It's one of the reasons I joined Clio, was a genuine belief in this. But if I take a very solutions-oriented approach, it's still difficult to unpack the problem. And so we've seen a sort of a diversity of approaches here, right? We've seen employers who say, I want to provide family-friendly benefits, and the first place they start to think about is family forming and family building benefits. That might be more inclusive fertility, adoption, surrogacy, sort of paths to parenthood type benefits. That might be better coverage or reimbursement for services. We've seen employers gravitate towards leave policies, right? Thinking about more inclusive parental leave policies, bereavement leave, caregiver leave. And then we've seen, I think, others focus on parenting and caregiving. The short answer is, I think the perfect solution for an employer encompasses all of these, but there is this open question of where to start. And I think one of the things that can be really helpful is to take a step back and start with simply data, right? What is the makeup of my population demographically? What percentage are parents? What percentage do I expect to be looking to start or grow their family? What percent are caregiving for an adult loved one, but perhaps don't identify as a caregiver? And I think that allows us to start to unpack the needs within the workforce so that we can prioritize where we start rather than kind of shooting in the dark, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's important. And I think it goes back to the validation piece that you talked about earlier. It's like we have to understand and validate that people have unique experiences. And, when companies are looking at where to start, what other tactics do you see them, taking to really validate and assess what their workforce needs today and what they want?
Yeah, so there's really simple things we can do, which is, for most employers, we have census data, right? We can look at who's enrolled in, for example, our health benefits, how many of them have dependents. It starts to help us get at least at some basic numbers of the needs of the workforce. There's obviously opportunities to survey employees, and you mentioned, some of the work that's being done there. I think the challenge of surveys is they're often quite laborious to undertake. They take time to analyze. You can't do them as frequently. One of I think the most interesting sort of more nimble tactics I've seen employers deploy is focus groups. And that might be focused specifically on working closely with an employee resource group or an affinity group within your organization. Perhaps you have a working parents group. And and to understand the needs of that group and, frankly, help have them evangelize a path forward, test solutions even. We've seen employers have those groups pilot solutions and help make the decision. The other is just broader focus groups. So I was speaking with an employer the other day, a large manufacturer. They've got multiple plants across the U.S. and they simply went into plants. They basically planned a month. They made the rounds at 3 or 4 different plants and held focus groups with employees to understand what was, they didn't go in with an agenda. They actually, very purposely tried to keep the questions open-ended to just simply understand what are you thinking about? And I think they uncovered a lot. The blessing and the curse of that model is you sometimes uncover problems that you may not know how to solve or may not be in a position to solve. But they learned a lot about things like financial wellness and well-being that were really important to employees. They learned a lot about challenges related to childcare and caregiving overall. And so it gave them at least a frame of reference to start to think about where to prioritize and focus their energy.
Yeah, I think the focus groups are so important because it feels safer sometimes than a survey. I think the other challenge with the survey that I see is you're getting someone in a moment. Like if I'm having a great morning, kids are at school, I'm at work, this feels like easy peasy, you got me, versus if you caught me on a day where it feels like everything's falling apart, I'm going to answer those questions very differently. So I think the focus group, it's more interactive, it's a discussion, and to have the ERGs support that, or for companies to support and give resources to the ERGs to further, gather information during those focus groups, I think it's a great strategy too. I think a lot of ERGs are underutilized and under-resourced.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly see this with our existing customers as well. We spend a lot of time working closely with ERGs, both to help make other employees aware of Clio as a benefit, but also to pressure test the product, to pressure test our approach. The sort of parallel to me of focus groups and the sort of the value of this kind of one-to-one interaction, we see this even in our own products, right? So I won't go too deep here, but one of the things that I think that makes Clio unique is every employee who enrolls in Clio is matched with a Clio guide who's a health or parenting expert and is there to kind of support them through the ups and downs of their own journey, right? However, unique it may be. And the reason we've seen value in that model is because I don't always know the questions to ask, right, as an employee. And so in the same way that a survey, can often feel a bit sort of sterile, if I just simply asked an employee, what do you need? It goes back to this sort of solutioning mindset. We don't always know what we need. Sometimes it takes, some sussing out to sort of uncover those needs. And oftentimes the solution is much clearer from that, right?
Yeah, it's communication, right? It's a different way of communication where it's conversation and it's discussion and it's trust. It's all the things we talked about with humanity that often don't exist with how we approach employee experience right now. So the next question I have is around what are the most common changes you're seeing in how employees go about adapting to family support benefits?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say I'll sort of break it into a few categories. In my mind, the kind of perfect family support strategy, if you will, is a combination of both policy changes as well as benefit changes, right? So I think they often go hand in hand. And one of the things that we've seen employers do really successfully is actually roll them out hand in hand so that for an employee, they can see the full view. One of the most recent examples of this that I became viral on LinkedIn was this Show Us Your Leave campaign where employers began posting their leave policies and the other benefits they have that go along with that. And it was, I think, a good reminder for a lot of folks that if I'm an employee simply scrolling a benefits page, it's really hard for me to piece together the deliberateness with which the benefits were designed, but they always are deliberate, right? There's no employer out there who's haphazardly choosing benefits. It always is with a lot of thought and intent, but that can sometimes be missed for the employee. And so one of the things that we've seen employers do really successfully is piece together sort of policy and benefit changes. And on the benefit side, we've seen a focus on inclusive benefits. So perhaps there's a broader sort of family support benefit put in place like a Clio that sort of captures the diversity of need across families, and then more targeted benefits that meet the needs of families as well. So that might be bolstered mental health benefits, right, that help the whole workforce. That might be a pediatric behavioral health benefit, which is an area that we're seeing more and more discussion around. That might be a family forming benefit, right, more inclusive policies and benefits there. And so that might be also a more flexible childcare benefit, right? That's one we've seen a lot of employers lean on. And so together, these things create, I think, a more inclusive view and approach to supporting the workforce. One really great recent example of this that I've seen is one of our customers, H&R Block, who at the start of the year, they actually publicly announced sweeping changes to both their policies and their benefits. And if you ask
the interesting shift that I've seen in my own thinking around it is that it is around inclusivity. Like when we talk about DE&I, often I think benefits is ignored from that discussion, and we just kind of figure out what a company wants. There's a policy for why that's in place, and then it's just sort of pushing this onto everyone and expecting that it's going to meet their needs, and then they're on the phone, every night trying to figure out how they can get other benefits outside of that. So to be able to really think about inclusivity around benefits, it takes the pressure and the judgment off of the employee to go and then have to ask for it. We're offering this because we understand our workforce has very different needs. And I think it needs to be an important part of a company's approach to not only employee experience, but as you brought up early on, to DE&I as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting to me is, do companies even know that this is an option? If we had a survey right now and we launched a survey and we asked every company, are working families important to your company? 100% would say yes, we know this. But when companies look at kind of building their engagement approach and when they look at their benefits packages, do they just not realize that there is this structure they can put in place to offer a more inclusive approach for families?
Yeah, I certainly think there's an element of that. I mean, certainly many of the benefits we're talking about, right? Family support, family building support, pediatric behavioral health, these are newer benefits areas. And so I think it isn't always clear how to piece them together. One of the things I think it's been really fascinating to see is I'm seeing HR and benefits leaders who have now this playbook that they take from company to company. We've had a couple situations like this at Clio where we have an employer who chooses to roll out Clio, they move on to another business, and they have this same playbook of solutions that they want to bring together. And so I think it's one of these, once you uncover your approach to solving this, you have more confidence in it. But we're often used to a more traditional benefits package, which is a health plan, perhaps an EAP, and some standard leave policies. And it isn't, I think there's one of the things I've seen employers do really successfully is sort of take the current stack, if you will, and then crosswalk to where it's falling short for them, and then crosswalk to a solutions exercise. And then once you have that, now you have this sort of playbook or arsenal to work from. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It absolutely does. So when thinking about how companies could approach this, if a company is looking to, provide more inclusive benefits for working families, are they replacing their existing benefits? Are they starting afresh? Or, is this something that kind of is complementary to benefits they already have in place?
Yeah, I would say this is one where it certainly depends on the employer. I've seen, kind of maybe broadly two strategies here. One is thinking about these as net new benefits, right? So, often this starts with a C-suite level imperative to think about support for employees differently and a new allocation of resources. And we start to think about what are we going to add and at what cost to the company. I think, that may feel daunting in many cases, but the reality is the ROI is really clear here, especially as we think about it across this spectrum of health, talent management, and DE&I. I think it's easier and easier to make the case for adding new here and bolstering this sort of total rewards package. The other I've seen is starting to reallocate away from benefits that perhaps haven't delivered in the form of engagement. And so perhaps, you have a more traditional EAP structure that hasn't generated engagement. You may borrow from there for other support. Perhaps you've historically had a more rigid childcare benefit, and perhaps you've reallocated some resources from there to support a different, more flexible benefit. And so I think there's this opportunity to ground yourself in what are employees using today and what are they not? And the things they're not using, is it that they don't know they exist, or that they're not quite meeting the mark for the changing needs of the workforce, and reallocating away from that?
Yeah, so very flexible. It's different options, and companies can take a flexible approach. What are some of the trends that you're seeing across different verticals when it comes to benefits?
Yeah, I would say, one of the perhaps most fascinating elements of the current sort of, talent shortage, if you will, is that it's impacted many verticals, right? We're seeing a tight talent market across most industries. And so in that sense, I think, my answer is, like, we've seen actually a lot of the same strategies deployed, whether that be in retail or, CPG or life sciences or financial services, right? Very different industries, but thinking about support for families very similarly. I would say probably the most pronounced place I've seen really concerted effort is, industries where you have a high competition for talent, a limited talent pool, which is many, and there is a sort of an element of benefits as a means to sort of combat runaway wages. And I think this is actually a topic that we're going to see play out in many industries, which is we have this confluence of factors that are quite challenging: high competition for talent, rising inflation, which has resulted in increases in wages in a lot of areas, and employers can only withstand it for so long, right? And so there is going to be this natural gap that occurs between total rewards expectations and what an employer can financially or reasonably deliver. And that's an area where I think really high value benefits become really useful. And so one example, this is in the life science industry, we've seen employers gravitate towards more inclusive benefits, not just as a retention tool, but as a recruiting tool as well, right? And I think that's where you see this playing out most interestingly, is where employers are able to sort of go back to what we said before, kind of have that win-win of leveraging a more inclusive benefit strategy as not just a recruitment tool, but also a retention tool, and are very public about it, right? They're putting out press releases about their new benefits and things of that nature to really sort of show who they are as an employer.
Yeah, the employer brand is everything right now. I mean, in our TA research, this is a huge theme. I know for HR Executive magazine, it's a big theme of some of the articles that they cover as well. But to have your employer brand be so exposed, especially during the pandemic, for a lot of these companies, it's not going to come down to just how much you're paying people for the short period of time where they can do it. It's going to come down to the full picture. And I think, to me, benefits is a representation of not just the policies, but the culture of the company. Like, this is how I view you. This is what I think you deserve as a person, versus just, this is how much money we can pay you because we're in a position to do so right now. It doesn't necessarily reflect the culture. I mean, to me, benefits is a real reflection of a company culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's to nerd out for a moment. Like, it goes back to the inception of the sort of employer-sponsored benefits world to begin with, right? Which is you have this moment of a delta between wages and expectations, and employers looked to benefits to show who they were and to show employees they were valued. And I think that the term total rewards is a really true statement, right? It is meant to reflect how we value an employee. We don't always have the tools to effectively sort of quantify that, right? So that's the challenge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some great questions that have come in. So I'm going to read through some of these as I ask. And one that came in I think it's an important one because we know that working families is not just a point in time. Like if you asked me 5 years ago, what would benefits look like for working families? I would think it's early stage when you're starting a family and just during that period of time, whether that's parental leave, whether that's, thinking about, kind of early stage, but it's ongoing. I mean, people face different challenges and you don't necessarily need to have children to think about what the benefits would include. Where do you see whether it's aging parents or individuals with disabilities fitting into this discussion of family-friendly benefits?
Yeah, it's a really great question because I think this is where when we talk about family-friendly, what we're really talking about is what is the most inclusive set of benefits I can offer. Because you're absolutely right. The challenges that I'm thinking about personally relate to starting a family, relate to caring for my parents as they age. My boss has 2 teenagers at home. Those are very different needs, right? And he's grappling with one going off to college and what that means for their family. And so as you think about sort of following an employee through their life cycle in the workforce, their needs evolve as well. And so finding benefits and policies that can sort of adapt to those needs as they evolve becomes really valuable so that any employee scrolling through their benefits can connect the dots to how they might value it, which is often the challenge we run up against.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great question from Jenny Dearborn on, the comment of benefits policy is an important question, but an even better one is what is your policy utilization? And I think that's so important. We have to look at how our employees using this, going back to kind of how you assess what they need. I wonder what other metrics that companies should look at when they're tracking the benefits in general or family-friendly benefits.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Jenny, because if we take the question of utilization to start, unpacking utilization is a function of, to your point, do individuals feel comfortable utilizing the benefit? So that's one. There's an open question of, do they know the benefit exists, right? And have we been able to explain the benefit well enough to employees? This is, I think, where the most inclusive set of benefits is likely the easiest set of benefits to explain to somebody because they can connect the dots of how it works for them. And then if the answer is they know about the benefit, they feel comfortable using it, then the question is it the wrong benefit, right? Am I not matching the needs of their workforce with this benefit? And so I think that's certainly a great place to start is what are employees utilizing in the benefits today and what are they not and why, right? That's the first question to answer. And then within a benefit, I think one of the things that's been most remarkable about the last decade in employer-sponsored benefits is the proliferation of digital health solutions. And I think, when I spent some time over the summer interviewing HR and benefits leaders specifically about this question of like, how do you know your benefits are working? And what I consistently heard is, there's no doubt in my mind that when somebody engages with a solution, it's a positive experience and that there's an impact. What I often struggle with is getting them to use it at all. And so that's why I think this utilization question emerges. But then once somebody engages with a solution, I think you have to start to match how you measure sort of return and impact against what the solution can deliver. And so, this is frankly an evolving challenge for us at Clio because so much of what we do is trying to meet an employee where they are in their own experience, which means by design, there's a diversity of things we're doing, right? And so we often look at metrics, what we think of as sort of employee reported metrics as a means to start to get at this of measuring employee confidence, measuring employee well-being and sort of, a feeling of belonging and support. These are metrics that are historically have been difficult to quantify, but there are research tools to do it, and they have the added benefit of really tying well into talent management and DE&I as well. So there's an opportunity to kind of bridge our metrics across strategies so that we have a common set of things we measure solutions against.
Yeah, I imagine productivity would be another one, which is also hard to quantify. But if you think about the impact, and we all know this personally, the amount of time you have to spend on the phone with insurance companies or think about finding, additional benefits and support that you need for your family or for your own needs, it's so time consuming. I mean, it's so time consuming. You have to do it during the workday because that's typically when, these customer service representatives are available to talk to you. So I imagine too, there's a huge impact on productivity if you're giving employees this very inclusive, broad set of benefits where they don't have to spend their personal time at work to make phone calls.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Sharif, this was so wonderful. I learned so much. I wish I could take notes. I'm glad there's a recording here available. But I'm hoping we could just wrap up here with one final question from me, which is, what would be your one piece of advice for any company that's looking to take a more proactive approach to supporting working families? Where should they start? What would be the first piece of advice you give them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's what I think about a lot. So, my piece of advice would be begin to unpack the problem slowly, right? I think too often in the conversations I'm having, the problem just, it feels so expansive that it's overwhelming, and so we start to sort of gravitate towards immediate solutioning, and so. I would start with something really simple, which is, do you understand the demographic breakdown of your workforce? Let's start there, because I think it illuminates a lot about what question to ask next. If I want to support families, understanding what percentage of my employees today have a family and the breakdown of that family helps me understand what percentage I might expect to be in the sandwich generation today, right? Caregiving for an adult loved one. What percentage might I expect to be considering starting a family? And then I can ask the next questions of what does it mean to provide better support, right?
Yeah, that's great. Well, this is great. I feel like we could talk about this for another 3 hours, but unfortunately we have to wrap up now. So thank you so much, Sharif. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for all the important work you do. I think it's wonderful. I wish I had this when I was starting a family, and I wish I had it now as my kids are definitely presenting some challenges to me at this stage too. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to HR Executive for hosting this.